Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 614, and today's date is March 12th, 2015, and the title of this episode is China Takes the Next Step, Talks Underway with the IMF to Endorse Yuan as a Reserve Currency. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, yesterday we talked about how Greece came out, and they came out swinging, and they were like, listen, Germany, you owe us money. During the war, the Nazis forced us to loan them money, and now we need that money back. And if you're not going to do it, we're going to seize your property. And we can see they're using this as leverage at this point. And we've been talking about, well, maybe Greece might be taking these 4 months and might be having or talking with Russia and China to make some type of deal to help them out in their financial situation. And we're getting a confirmation from the Russian finance minister, which confirmed that Moscow could consider financial help to Greece. Greeks are very positive on Russia by 61%, and they're not so positive on going with the European solution, which is at 23%. And we can see that the Prime Minister of Greece, Tsipras, is going to be meeting with Putin in May. Now, we have to understand the 4-month extension expires in June. They're meeting in May. Is this a coincidence? At this point, I don't think so. And we can see that from what is going on here, this would actually benefit Greece. I mean, they could be looking at cheaper gas for struggling households. They would see increased Russian investment and tourism to provide much-needed economic boost. Moscow, in return, would be rewarded with friendly ally with veto power inside the EU at a time of heightened tension over the Ukraine crisis. And we can see right now that the Greek government could be doing two things at this point. They might switch over and go with the Russian plan, or they're using the Russian card as a bargaining position, and if it doesn't work out, they're just going to go right over to the Russian side here. And we're going to have to watch this and see what they're going to do. Now, during all this, what do we see? Well, we see they've passed a bill today that enables them to go in and steal the people's pensions. The massive irony of this bill is the bill enables Greek deposits to be fully invested in Greek sovereign bonds, which Tsipras and Varoufakis both admitted today is unsustainable and will never be repaid. Is this good for the people? Absolutely not. And during this whole entire crisis in Greece, we see the unemployment rate has gone up. It has gone up to 26.1%. It was at 25.5%. About 73% of Greece's 1.24 million jobless are long-term unemployed, meaning they have been out of work for at least 12 months. And this is why the people there are struggling. It's getting harder and harder, and this is why they want a change. And let me just say again, if the government decides to work out a deal with the Eurogroup and it's not in the best interest of the people are going to rise up and say, we want you out. But I'm hoping from all the signs and indicators that we're seeing that Tsipras and his government, they have a plan. I personally don't like the plan of dipping into the pension funds to pay off things, because the people are being robbed of their money because they're getting something that's absolutely worthless in place of their, I should say, currency. And I'm hoping that they make some type of deal with Russia or China to help out the situation, to spur economic growth, and to get these people back to work and making a living. Because, listen, we all want the same thing. We want to be left alone by the government. We want to have good jobs. We want to feel secure in the jobs. We want to provide for our family. We'd like to go on vacation. We would like to live free. I think every person around the world wants the same thing. What's different is that the governments don't want that. They don't want what we want. They want the opposite, because most of the governments are being controlled by the central bankers, and their agenda is much, much different. We see here in the United States, the initial jobless claims remain above 300,000 for the second week in a row. Something we have not seen in 6 months. And the trend remains unchanged. The jobless claims are continually moving up, not down. Because, as we know, more and more people are getting laid off. We see companies coming in saying, yeah, our earnings aren't good and we're going to have to restructure, which normally means laying off employees. We see Intel right now, which is the chip maker. They're saying that their first quarter revenue is down by 7%, and they're saying it's because of weak demand. Well, again, if the people aren't out there purchasing, and they're not going out there to buy computers, desktops, laptops, iPads, and all these different devices, there's going to be no demand for this. And we can see that sales are hurting everywhere. Business inventories missed for the 8th of the last 9 months and show no change month on month. The weakest since May 2013. Building materials, furniture, and autos saw inventories fall as department stores' inventories rose, coupled with sales weakness. Retail sales down by negative 0.9%. This is the highest inventory to sales ratio since Lehman. And when we look at the retail numbers, it is falling apart. It is completely crumbling. February retail sales missed once again and missed big across the board. This is the third biggest miss in a row, and we see the retail sales coming in at negative 0.6%, far below the 0.3% expected, and in line with the negative 0.8% drop last month. Let's put all this into perspective, because when we look at the retail sales, it is absolutely awful. December, retail sales, negative 0.9%. January, and again, we have to remember December, that is the height of the season for retail sales. That is the holiday season where people just go out and they purchase gifts for the holiday season. It was completely awful. January, negative 0.8%. February, negative 0.6%. Again, why is this? Because people do not have jobs. Yes, they tell us the labor market is strong because they're going by the manipulated numbers. I can't believe that all these government people are sitting there going, hey, does this make sense? Let's see. Unemployment is at 5.5%, but retail is falling apart. Stores are closing, and the real estate industry is falling apart. They're so blinded by everything, they don't even realize what's going on. The breakdown in sales show a decline in most major categories, with the drop most acute in autos, negative 2.5%. Building materials, negative 2.3%. How is building materials down if they continually tell us that real estate is doing well? Lumber sales are down. Prices are dropping. Does that make sense? You would expect lumber sales to go up if they're building like crazy, but they're not. It's an illusion. We also see it in furniture, food, and health and personal general merchandise sales. All down. Things are not going well. We've had a tick up of the Baltic Dry Index. It reached 568 points. It dropped yesterday by 3 points. It dropped today 5 more points. And this is the raw material which is used to produce goods in factories. Now, if the people aren't out there buying, taking their hard-earned money and going to the retail stores and purchasing goods, there's no reason for the factories to produce. If the factories aren't producing, there's no reason to get the raw materials. And this is why we see it dropping. And it's very hard to manipulate the Baltic Dry Index. It's kind of protected because it's raw material from speculators. And we can see that, yeah, the people are tapped out. The unemployment rate is not this illusionary 5.5% that they want us to believe. It is closer, depending on which calculation you would like to use, it's anywhere from 23 to 30% at this time. It's probably even higher than that. But let's be conservative. It's in line with what is going on in Europe. But it's all hidden here because the United States can create money. They can manipulate the stock market. And they can convince the people with all their illusionary statistical manipulated numbers that everything is fine here. And we talked about how the stock market is manipulated. The precious metals is manipulated. Well, we have a little bit of a confirmation about the stock market. The former director of the SEC, John Ramsey, has stepped out to warn that the market is rigged, and that the system is headed for a major correction one way or another. Today's financial ecosystem is set up for an unfair advantage to those playing the game controlled by high-frequency trading, run by automated computer algorithms, and secret dark pool investors. It's exactly what we thought. It's a game, but we're not included. It's a game for the wealthy, for the central bankers. And they're keeping this continually moving upward to convince everyone that, no, what are you talking about? The stock market's up. The economy is doing great. Well, the stock market is not an indicator of what the economy is really doing. It's the last thing that falls apart when the economy collapses. It's been collapsing all this time. And when it hits the stock market and it collapses, it's too late. It's already done. The SEC's current trading rules, known as Regulation NMS, are partly responsible for the flourishing of high-frequency trading and the dispersion of trading across more than 40 venues. Ramsey said, the market is rigged against all retail investors, has questioned the tactics involved in using algorithms to buy and sell shares in fractions of a second. The rise of dark pools have allowed some of the biggest players in the game to make huge moves in secret and in a way that hides the impact of huge trading block purchases. The bulk of dark pool trades represent large trades by financial institutions that are offered away from public exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, so that such trades remain confidential and outside the purview of the general investing public. One of the main advantages for institutional investors in using dark pools is for buying or selling large blocks of securities without showing their hand to others and thus avoiding market impact, as neither the size of the trade nor the identity are revealed until the trade is filled. Ramsey warns that the current system isn't sustainable and cannot last forever. And we've been reporting on this, and here is confirmation that, this entire thing is rigged. It's rigged for the elite, the central bankers, to keep us in this illusion so they can get that war started. They know it's collapsing. If they stop the high-frequency trading and the plunge protection team removed itself from the equation and they didn't use this dark pool, guess what would happen to the stock market right now? It would completely crash and it would be done with. Look at the earnings of all these companies coming in. How in the world is the stock market continually going up? It makes no sense. And we understand why they're doing this, and they're trying to keep the illusion in front of the American people and the rest of the world, because they don't want to be blamed for what is coming. They don't want to say, oh, yes, it was us. We're the ones who caused the economic collapse. No, they want this to be blamed on another country or group. And they're doing everything in their power to provoke these countries and to stop these countries from maybe having a currency that might be a reserve currency. And we see that China and the IMF, they are now in talks. They're underway to endorse the yuan as a global reserve currency. A senior Chinese central bank official said Thursday that the country is actively communicating with the IMF on the possibility of including the yuan or the renminbi as a reserve currency. In late 2015, the IMF will conduct its twice-a-decade review of the basket of currencies its members can count toward their official reserves. China would need to satisfy the Washington-based lenders' economic benchmarks and get the support of most of the 187 member countries. China said the yuan has also been used as a reserve currency in some countries and regions already. Now again, like I said, the United States government, central bankers, they will try to stop this from happening. They don't want this to happen. They rather start a war before this even gets voted on. But if they cannot provoke a war, they will do everything they possibly can to stop it. Now, will they succeed? Maybe not. We're going to have to watch and find out. And we understand that China, they might end up looking to back their currency with gold. A well-respected analyst and China follower which postulates that China could actually be holding as much as 30,000 tons of gold in various government accounts, and that within the next 3 years, the nation will link the yuan to the gold. The 30,000 ton figure has come from the Simon Hunt of Simon Hunt Strategic Services. China right now does not trust Washington's ability to manage the sole reserve currency unit in the interest of the rest of the world. They're nervous about it. So is Russia. And this is why they created the BRICS system, to be separate and apart. They also see the dollar. It is falling apart. It is imploding. It is crashing. It's at its end stage, and they realize this. Historically, America has used the inflation route to reduce its debts to the rest of the world. Some yuan internationalization is already in hand with. So far, swap agreements have been set up with around 28 countries, and the establishment of a yuan trading center in Zurich through which the yuan payments may be facilitated. And they're on their way. And this has been a slow process. We've been talking about this, and if you've been following me since the beginning, we've been talking about this for a while now, over a year. And of course, people have said, no, this is impossible. But here we are today. Again, things that I talk about today might not happen in a day or 2 days. It might happen in 6 months. Because we are looking at every indicator to see what is going to happen in the future. Sometimes we get it perfectly. Sometimes we're a little bit off. But we're not trying to predict anything. We're trying to figure out what is going on in this world. And by looking at all this news, we can put a picture together and say, yes, I see what they're trying to do. I see what they're trying to cover up. I see that they're lying to us. And this is what it is all about. I mean, we see Moscow right now. Moscow trading in the ruble yuan futures will begin on March 17th, with the pair of currencies expected to become the third most popular by volume. The Moscow exchange hopes the futures will be liquid enough so manufacturers and suppliers can increase their trade turnover between Russia and China. In October of 2014, the Moscow Exchange and the Bank of China signed a cooperation agreement to expand mutual settlements in national currencies. The step was made to reduce the dependence on the U.S. dollar in bilateral trade and move away from the Western financial dominance. And this is why we see China coming up with their own payment system, starting their own stock exchange, starting their own gold exchange. They're doing all of this on purpose. And when we watch and we look at each step, we can put the picture together and we can see where this is all heading. And this is what we have been doing. Now, here in the United States, we understand that Boehner invited Netanyahu in to speak to the Congress, which is completely against the Logan Act. Actually, he should be charged and thrown to prison. And now we see 47 U.S. senators who wrote a letter to Iran telling them, listen, don't go along with this agreement, back off. And if there is an agreement, we can just remove it at any time. Well, they are in violation of the Logan Act. There's a petition right now with 187,000 signatures. They want the 47 senators brought up on charges from the Logan Act, which was enacted in 1799, which forbids unauthorized citizens from negotiating with foreign governments. The only place in the government that can negotiate with foreign governments is not the Congress. It is the president is responsible for international negotiations and finding agreements with foreign leaders and countries. So all of these senators should be brought up on charges because they broke the law. And that's why there's a petition out there, because we can see no one's doing anything as usual. Because again, when the government people break the law, they're above the law. No, it doesn't apply to us. Like Obamacare. Oh, no, we're exempted. That doesn't apply for us. It's the peasants that will get this. The peasants have to abide by the law. Not us. We're royalty. No, that's not how it works. The laws apply equally to every single person. No one is above them. Now, there was a poll that Gallup took, and they wanted to know what Americans were thinking. And they asked Americans, what is the number one problem in the United States? Now, of course, many people listening to me would think it's the economy, because this is what we're talking about. You would think it'd be war, because this is what we're talking about. But you have to remember, the people out there and the people they're polling, they're looking at mostly the corporate news. But I have to say, most of the people are starting to realize that it's the government. That is our major problem. And we can see from the Gallup poll that the number one problem is the government. The next one down the line is the economy. So we can see this illusion of the economy recovering is working well with a lot of people. We know it's not recovering. We know we're collapsing. But they see that there is a problem with the government. There's something going on here. It doesn't make sense. And they're the cause of most of what we're seeing today. And when we look at this, we can see that the president continually writes executive orders, memorandums. He's writing all the laws. It's basically a dictatorship, and he's really not allowed to do this. He should be brought up on charges or impeachment charges some way, somehow. And this should also be done, because we can see the government is doing everything not in the best interest of the people, in the best interest of themselves. If they want to receive funds for their campaigns, they have to do things for those people who are supplying the money. And we can see that they're all out for themselves. They're not in government to help the people. Have you seen anything so far that has helped the everyday person? No, what we're seeing is the talk of war and taxes and how the government people will become wealthier and wealthier while they're in government. This is all we're seeing. We're seeing nothing else. And while they're doing this, they want to take more and more of the rights away from the people, which they really can't do. They want you to think they can, but a right cannot be given or taken away because you're born with them. And they're trying to convince us that, the Second Amendment, we can write laws and kind of counteract it in some way. And they try to remove ammunition from the AR-15, where they were saying, we have to get rid of the cop killers, the M855 green tip, and the 223. We just can't have those out there. And it was proven that, no cop was ever killed by these. Actually, people haven't even been using it when they came in contact with police. And we can see from all the complaints, after receiving 80,000 comments from the public and everyone up in arms, the ATF right now is moving away from banning the M855. This does not mean they won't try a different tactic, because they're continually trying to do this. They're trying to ban as much ammunition as possible, especially those weapons that they deem equal to what they have. And we can see this is what they're doing at this point. Now, there are rumors floating around, and it seems like the corporate media is putting it out there, and they're saying that Putin died. He had a stroke, and he died. And they put this rumor out there before that he had Asperger's or mental deficiencies or something like that. They're trying to discredit him. And this all came about, and it was published and circulated by Reuters in a report about the postponement of the president's visit to Kazakhstan. But coming out of Russia, they're saying, no, that's not the reason why he postponed a visit. There was something else that he needed to attend. And we can see that this is propaganda. Now, something interesting in Russia. An upper house MP has drafted a bill where they want all candidates in Russian elections to inform voters about their sanity, that they have no addictions. The senator wants to change 3 federal laws that regulate basic citizens' rights, the presidential elections and the elections of the lower house MPs. If the bill is passed, all candidates in this election would have to produce certificates from psychiatrists and medics specializing in alcoholism, drug addiction, and their mental state. Such tests and certificates are widespread in Russia. You need this to get a driver's license. You need this to get a gun permit. And I think here in the United States, and I think in many nations, when you go for a job, you have to take a drug test, and you need to do all these things. Well, I think this has to be the same with government officials. They're moving into positions at the highest order right now, especially president, vice president, secretary of state. They should be going through this process also. They should have a drug test. They should go into a psychiatrist office to see if they're mentally stable. We should know what medications they are on, and we should understand, are they and do they have the ability to hold this position mentally? And I believe this should be done here in the United States. Just like when you go for a job in a company. A lot of times, I remember when I went for a job, and it was for minimum wage when I was in college, I had to go for a lie detector test to work in a home improvement store. And I had to get fingerprinted, which was sent to the FBI. Other places I had to take drug tests. Well, I believe the same thing should be done with our government people. Now, it seems the Swiss are introducing this new program called the Enlightenment Intelligence Agency Act. It sounds very good for the people. Well, it isn't. Again, whenever they come out with these things, it's always the opposite. What this does, it expands the powers of the government to secretly track every citizen. Tap phones. They want to know where you're going. They want to see who you're speaking with. And it makes no difference if you're charged with a crime or not. They just want to do it to everybody. One by one, every country seems to be turning to the same type of tactic of spying on their citizens. They want to know what you're thinking, what you're doing, who you're meeting with. They want to know your financial transactions. Why would they want to do this? Well, there's just no other reason to track the movement of every car, every person, storing every phone call, text message, email. What are they paranoid about? Well, it's always one thing: losing their power. They know the system is coming down. They know we're in a collapse situation. And throughout history, we've seen the same thing. When the people are put into a corner and their backs are against the wall and they have nothing to lose because the system is crashing around them. They have no job. They have no money. They can't support their family. People now are running to the markets because the entire system is crumbling around them. They're going to look for someone to blame. And the governments, the central bankers, they are worried. And they want to keep an eye on those people who have the intention of going after their authority. This is what they're nervous about. This is why they're putting more security in front of government buildings. This is why they're placing a buffer zone in front of the government buildings. They're getting prepared. This is why they've created a national police force. They're nationalizing them. They want them to fall under the control of the federal government. DHS they created for that purpose. It's their own private police force. They are getting ready. This is why they've been purchasing billions of rounds of ammo. This is why they've been sending tanks, machine guns, uniforms, riot gear, surveillance equipment to all the police around the country. It's not just happening here in the United States. It's happening in Canada. It's happening in Australia, throughout Europe. They are getting prepared to come down and control the people. This is why they were removing everyone's weapons in all of these countries. They don't want you to have weapons because a population without weapons is very easy to control. You have nothing to fight back with. What? An axe against a gun? Very difficult. A population with weapons cannot be controlled. Actually, they do the controlling. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that the Ukraine finance minister is out there, and we see a lot of government people inside of Ukraine talking about how they're going to take back the southeastern area and Crimea. And there's a lot of talk about this, how they're going to restore the Ukrainian sovereignty over Crimea once again. And it feels like they're definitely getting ready to make a play and go after Crimea. It feels like what they're doing right now by building up military assets, training the forces in Ukraine, right after the southeastern area, they're definitely going to turn on Crimea. Now, Yatsenyuk is out there and he's screaming and yelling about this new documentary film that Russia put out, and Putin is in it, saying how they were going to take Crimea, and he wants this sent to The Hague. He wants the entire film and the trailer sent there, and he wants it sent to the International Court for justice, because this was all planned. Well, Yatsenyuk, let me just say, you were selected to be put in place after the coup. We have a recording from Victoria Nuland. They spent $5 billion to have this coup. And when everything was starting to fall apart, when everything was crumbling apart, yes, Russia was looking at the situation and saying, okay, we cannot let this go any further, because if the U.S. takes Ukraine with this coup regime change, they will have a strategic location and they will be a state on the Black Sea. And they went to the people and said, listen, if you want this, vote for it. If not, fine. They had the OSCE in there. They had many different countries looking in, and they voted. But what's very interesting is that the U.S. government officials, like Jen Psaki, is out there, and she's saying that, the documentary about Crimea was badly made. It's all propaganda. And then someone asked her a question. Did you actually see it and view it? No, I never saw it. So how can you be saying it's all propaganda? Well, I'm saying that everything that comes out of Russia is propaganda. Well, that's a general statement. So basically, this is what the U.S. government does. They just say things without any facts or proof or anything. They said it about MH17. They said it about Assad with chemical weapons. They just make things up as they go along, and they never have proof. And when people call them on it, they can't even produce the proof because it's all propaganda. And we have to remember, a rider, Amendment 114, attached to the NDAA in 2012, the government in Section 501 is allowed to use propaganda on the American people, and this is what they're doing. And when they were having the referendum in Crimea, no one, NATO and the ambassadors from 50-nation Euro-Atlantic Partnership, no one at the meeting challenged the Crimean vote. Not one. The entire thing was in compliance with international law, and no one said anything. We also have to remember from the UN for self-determination. Self-determination denotes the legal right of people to decide their own destiny in international order. Self-determination is a core principle of international law arising from customary international, but also recognizes as a general principle of law and enshrined in a number of international treaties. For instance, self-determination is protected in the United Nations Charter and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights as a right of all peoples. If they decide, they have the right to do this. And this is what they did. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that the Ukrainian troops are bringing in reinforcements. And they're doing it near the city of Mariupol. And the Ukrainian armed forces are beginning combat exercises near the line of engagement with the positions of the self-proclaimed Donetsk people. The motorized infantry units continue being deployed to the contact line from back areas, and convoys with ammunition are building materials for fortifications are heading there. They're bringing in the Grad BM-21 multiple rocket launcher system batteries, and they've been set up and pointed towards the Donetsk region in that direction. So we can see right now, and we've said this in the past, Ukraine is not looking for peace. They are getting ready for the next offensive. We see the OSCE decided to extend its mandate for observers at crossing points on the Russian-Ukrainian border for 3 more months. The Donetsk people are saying, Kiev has only 2 more days to prove that it is in compliance with the Minsk agreement. And as we can see right now, and especially with the OSCE, they're not getting the information they need to show that, yes, they have been pulling back all their heavy artillery. And they have been pulling it back, but not that far, only about 12 to 18 miles. And it's supposed to be much, much further back than that. And we've been hearing from the Ukrainian forces that they can bring this heavy artillery right back to the front line at a moment's notice. And of course, they're doing this on purpose because they're getting ready for the next offensive. Now, we understand that NATO is having a drill in the Black Sea. There are 6 NATO ships that are doing this, and we see that Russia right now is having the same type of drill with their warships. A tactical group of Russian Black Sea warships, they're holding military exercising, targeting decoy enemy bombers and ships. It is the Bora-class air cushion ship which is doing this. The current Russian military drills are taking place concurrently with the NATO naval drills. And both sides now are flexing their ego, flexing their muscles to show, listen, we have strength, so do we. And they're both doing it at the same time. The United States is out there, and they are urging Vietnam to stop helping Russia fuel their bombers. And they don't understand why Vietnam is doing this, but Vietnam is letting Russia refuel in their area. And Washington is basically saying, stop this, please. We don't want this to happen, because you have to remember, Vietnam is one of the nations that encircles China, and it's a pivot point to get to Russia and to get to China. And they don't want this interrupted at this time. Poland. The Poland Minister of Defense has announced plans to buy Tomahawk cruise missiles for future submarines. Warsaw is ready to buy the SLCM submarine-launched cruise missile version of the long-range Tomahawk missile, either directly from the U.S. or from another country ready to assist. Poland is considering buying 3 submarines to enter into service. They are getting prepared. We see this being built up all over the place throughout Eastern Europe. They are getting ready for war. The U.S. Tomahawk cruise missile has a maximum range of about 1,600 kilometers, and it could be armed with a W-80 nuclear warhead if needed. And we can see that all these countries, NATO is building up. They want to create a Euro army. And of course, NATO doesn't like this. We see Poland and all the Baltic states, they're getting more and more U.S. military equipment into their region. This is being built up here. The same thing's happening in the Middle East, the same thing's happening in Africa, and they have already encircled China in the Pacific. We see in the Middle East, they are continually pushing the authorization for war. And we see U.S. trained and armed Iraqi military units are being brought up on charges because they're doing, and they're under investigation, for committing the same type of atrocities as the Islamic State. We see the Defense Secretary is pushing for war. Ashton Carter is trying to convince Congress that we need to go to war now. Kerry is alongside him saying, yes, we need to go to war. But Congress is looking at this, and they're saying that this doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere. Congress is not behind it. The people are not behind this. People don't want to go to war. They don't want to send their cousins, their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, their fathers off to war. Everything that they've been trying to do by showing us that the Islamic State is this scary terrorist has not been working. They even came up with manipulated polls to convince everyone that, yes, people want to go to war and stop the Islamic State. Well, I say to anyone who wants to go to war, you should sign up and go to war. Don't think other people are going to do it. You need to go and sign up. All the government of people who want war, they should be on the front lines, leading the way as leaders to show us this is what we should be doing. But again, we don't have leaders. They're afraid. They want other people to do this. They want the peasants to go out and fight for them. But you know what I say? If anybody wants war and they're so ready to go to war, they need to be on the front lines. Actually, this should be the new regulation in Congress, in the government. Whoever calls for war, you, your family, you're on the front lines. You're ready to go. You wanted it, here you go. And anyone else who wants war, they need to go also. Go right down to the recruiting area and sign up. You're ready to go. Go to war. And I think when you start talking to people and you tell them this, I don't think they're going to want war as much as they are saying they want war. And of course, all these people in Congress, the central bank, the elites, yeah, they keep talking war, but they're going to have to show us by example that this is the reason we're going to war, and they need to go on the front lines. Now, a couple of reports back, we talked about how Kaspersky and other organizations looked into the hacking collective dubbed the Equation Group, and we found out that the NSA might have something to do with this. And there's more and more evidence coming out, connecting the NSA to the Equation Group. And it is the string of the Backsnarf AB25, which was embedded in a sample of the Equation Group cyber espionage platform known as the Equation Drug. Backsnarf, according to the page 19 of the undated NSA presentation that was obtained by the Ars Technica, was the name of the project tied to the NSA's tailored access operation. While the presence of the Backsnarf artifact isn't conclusive proof, it was part of the NSA project by that name. The chances that there were two unrelated projects with the nation-state funding seems very small. It's kind of impossible. And we can see that all these cyber attacks and everything that the government's trying to convince us of, that yes, it was North Korea, yes, it was China, it was Russia, it was Syria, it is all coming from the inside. It's all coming from the NSA. And we understand they're trying to convince us that there's going to be these groups and countries that bring us into war by cyber attacking us. This has been their mantra since the beginning, that we're going to have a new cyber 9/11 or whatever they call it. They're trying to show us that the countries have the ability to bring down our economic infrastructure, our power grid. And this is why they've been doing this and building this up all along. Because eventually, as we can see, this entire system is falling apart. It's collapsing, and they have to be ready to go at a moment's notice because they do not want to be blamed for it. And you can see how they're provoking war all across the country. They're still trying to convince everyone that we need to go into Syria. Oh, they tried with the chemical, with sarin. That didn't work. They tried to have the Geneva II talks, to have Assad step down. That didn't work. They had the Free Syrian Army fighting in Syria for 3-4 years now? Even longer, 5 years? That hasn't worked. They tried to convince everyone that Assad was using chlorine gas. That didn't work. They tried to convince everyone that Caesar came out, and that's his code name, that he had pictures that Assad was torturing people. But again, these pictures were from hospitals, not from the torture site whatsoever. So anyone in this hospital, who knows where they came from? It wasn't proof. It was the after effects of maybe they were bombed or something else happened to them. And we can see now that they're going on the barrel bomb mantra right now to show us that, they told them not to use barrel bombs, and the Human Rights Watch is out there, and they're saying we have evidence that Assad used barrel bombs in civilian areas, and we can see that, this is why we need to remove Assad, and they were saying, yes, it was in Aleppo, and this is why we need to go in there. And they were showing the pictures and everything, and it turned out it wasn't Aleppo. It was Kobane. It was completely it's in a complete different area. And all the destruction you see there is from the U.S. bombing that area. They're doing whatever they possibly can to convince us why we need to go into Syria. And everything has been failing. The terrorist group, all their different propaganda tricks they're using, it is not working. And sooner or later, they're going to go with the big one. The big propaganda of a false flag event. And we can see we're heading down that path. We're getting closer and closer to them doing it. By everything that we've been looking at and everything that we've been talking about, they will become desperate. And they will go ahead with the next event to get us into war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.